The volunteer talk. Welcome to the volunteer talk, number 45. So today the topic is mystery of bird migration, and we have with us Mr. C.K.Vishnudas, and it's my duty now to introduce the speaker to you, to all of you. Mr. C.K.Vishnudas, he is presently the director of Hume Center for Ecology and Wildlife Biology at Wayanad. He is basically a field biologist with a broad interest on the evolution of life on Earth and how species evolve and adapt. Many of his research questions evolved from his extensive natural history explorations across India over a period of 20 years. He started his research on the birds of Western Ghats around 20 years back, somewhere in 1990s. His area of research basically covers different aspects of ornithology, like the breeding biology, population trends of bird communities in larger landscapes, evolutionary history of cryptic and endemic species of India, and also conservation of threatened species. Some of the notable surveys that he has taken part include the retracing Dr. Salim Ali's ornithological survey, which was basically conducted in 1933. This was retraced again after a period of 75 years. Another survey is the Malabar Ornithological Survey in 2010-2011. This was the first systematic ornithological survey conducted in 6 districts of North Kerala. He is the district coordinator of the Bird Atlas project. So this is a brief history, a brief introduction of Mr. C.K. Vishnudas. So on behalf of WWF and all volunteers, let me welcome Mr. C.K. Vishnudas to deliver the talk today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a brief introduction. And I'm happy to, first of all, my sincere thanks to WWF in Kerala for inviting me for this special topic on bird migration. So basically, I'm not studied bird migration as such, but as a person interested in birds over a period of time, like from my childhood, I've been observing birds in my backyard and in many places in the forest, and been able to do certain study about certain group of birds over a longer period of time. And some of other studies which we were part of, looking at the patterns of birds in the Kerala, like following Salim Ali's trail and later in the Malabar bird surveys and all that. So all these actually give us a lot of insight into the pattern of birds that we see in the Western Ghats. And we are able to explore some of the other parts of the country during the last 10 years. And we all know that bird migration is one of the very, very interesting aspect of a bird. When we look at, just like it has been fascinating for many people, like നമുക്ക് എല്ലാവർക്കും ഒരു പക്ഷേ പക്ഷികളെ കുറിച്ച് നമ്മൾ ചിന്തിക്കുമ്പം നമ്മൾ ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ നമ്മൾ അത്ഭുതപ്പെടുത്തുന്ന ഒരു കാര്യമാണ് പക്ഷികളുടെ ദേശാടനം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ഇത് ഒരു പക്ഷേ വർഷങ്ങളായിട്ട് ഇതിൽ പലതരത്തിലുള്ള പഠനങ്ങളും ഒക്കെ നടന്നുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ നമുക്ക് ഇന്ന് ഒരു പക്ഷേ ലോകത്തിലെ ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ ഗവേഷണം നടന്നിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു പക്ഷേ അനിമൽ ഗ്രൂപ്പ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു ഗ്രൂപ്പ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്, ഓർഗാനിസം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് പക്ഷികൾ തന്നെയാണ്. ഉദാഹരണത്തിന് നമ്മുടെ തിയറി ഓഫ് എവല്യൂഷൻ, ഡാർവിൻ വാലസും കൂടി മുമ്പോട്ട് വെച്ചിട്ടുള്ള നാച്ചുറൽ സെലക്ഷൻ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന പ്രകൃതി നിർദ്ധാരണം എന്ന് പറയുന്ന നമ്മുടെ തിയറി പരിണാമ സിദ്ധാന്തം. അതിലേക്കൊക്കെ ശരിക്കും എന്താ പറയുക, അത്തരം പഠനങ്ങൾക്കൊക്കെ ഉപയോഗപ്പെടുത്തിയിരിക്കുന്ന സബ്ജക്റ്റ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ അത് പക്ഷികളായിരുന്നു. ഡാർവിൻ പഠിച്ചത് ഗാലപ്പോഗസിലെ ഫിഞ്ചസിനെ കുറിച്ചാണ്. അതുപോലെ ആൽഫ്രഡസ് വാലസ് പ്രധാനമായിട്ടും നോക്കിയിരിക്കുന്നത് നമ്മുടെ ഈസ്റ്റ് ഇന്ത്യൻ ഐലൻഡുകളിലുള്ള ഈസ്റ്റേൺ ഐലൻഡ്സുകളിലുള്ള സുമാത്ര, അതുപോലെ ഇന്തോനേഷ്യൻ, ഓസ്ട്രേലിയ, ആ ഗ്രൂപ്പ് ഓഫ് ഐലൻഡ്സിലുള്ള പക്ഷികളുടെയും പൂമ്പാറ്റകളുടെയും ഒക്കെ പാറ്റേണുകളാണ്. എങ്ങനെയാണ് സ്പീഷീസുകൾ തമ്മിലുള്ള, അതായത് ഓരോ സ്പീഷീസുകളും തമ്മിലുള്ള ചെറിയ ചെറിയ വ്യത്യാസങ്ങൾ എങ്ങനെ അതിനെ മാറ്റം വന്നിരിക്കുന്നു ഓവർ പീരീഡ് ഓഫ് ടൈം, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു കോണ്ടിനെന്റിൽ നിന്ന് ഐലൻഡ്സിലേക്ക് പോകുന്ന സമയത്ത് എങ്ങനെയാണ് സ്പീഷീസുകൾ തമ്മിൽ വ്യത്യാസപ്പെടുന്നത്. ആ പാറ്റേൺ അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഫോസിലുകളൊക്കെ പഠിച്ചിട്ടാണ് നമുക്ക് തിയറി ഓഫ് എവല്യൂഷൻ ഒക്കെ.
Vishnu, sorry for the interruption. One Miss Aditi is there from Karnataka. So
okay.
She like to contribute English.
Okay. All right. Then I will shift to that. What I was trying to say about birds are one of the very interesting organisms that is well studied in the whole world. If you're looking at history of evolution, theory of evolution, everything, so birds has been used in many studies, right from the Darwin's exploration into the Galapagos Islands and the Wallace studies on the islands and island biogeography. And later on, if you look at Professor Ernest Mayr, he is also an evolutionary biologist who studied birds and used birds to substantiate the theory of natural selection and the theory of evolution for the advancement. He was also an ornithologist, and a lot of people contributed over a period of time looking at birds. So, and why birds? That's an interesting question. Like, it is simply because they can fly, they are very beautiful, they have different colors. If you look at a peafowl, you can see a wide range of colors. Whatever we see in the nature, you can see on a peafowl, like from its head to the tail. So you will see almost all the colors. And if you look at the green, there will be a variety of greens, like dark green to light green and blue and things like that. So interestingly, birds always attracted human. And one of the interesting feature that always within the birds that we always fascinated, or we are very curious about to know, is that they are the migratory pattern. So bird migration, as your topic rightly say, the mystery of bird migration is still many parts of many details of bird migration still remains as a mystery, and a lot of things to be studied in detail. So I'll just go to my presentation, where I will try to give some general aspects of migration, why this is happening, and what is happening to the overall in the migratory birds and all that. So, okay. So just a minute. So can you see the screen now?
Yes, you can please proceed.
Yes.
Okay. So you will see, so when we look at the sky, so you can see maybe in an evening or in the late, even in the night, you can see birds flying in the sky, at different patterns and all that. So when we look from the ground, you can see different patterns, like a different kind of shapes in which the birds are flying from one direction to other direction. And it is always a very, very interesting phenomena. So and some interesting questions when we tries to ask about bird migration is, like, where do they come from? That is an important thing. And where do they go? And how do they know when and where to travel? And how do they find their way? So these are some of the interesting questions that everyone, as a child of ornithology or a person who watch birds, always ask these questions. Also, where do they come from? Where do they go? And you might be heard about that certain birds comes every year into a particular location, year after year. And for example, our Indian pitta is a migratory bird to the south, especially in Kerala. So they'll start appearing in our backyards and our forest by the end of October, November, and things like that. So then you can see in the early morning, apart from the normal calls of birds that we see, that we hear in our forest environments or in our backyards, you will start hearing about the call of Indian peacock. So that is a very interesting two-note call, VPU. So something like that. That's how the Indian peacock calls. So every year, if you ring a bird, you can find like certain birds come to the certain location year after year, and how they come. So we now use our when we travel from Trivandrum into Thrissur or to some Coimbatore and all that. So nowadays we use Google Earth, Google Map as a navigation tool. So the Google navigation tool help us to travel from one place to other without asking any people on the way. So it will take us to certain routes, and we can reach one point to other point. But how birds know about all these things? How are they coming back again and again into a particular point? That is also very, very an interesting question. And how they find their way in their journey. So these are some of the interesting questions that we ask when we talk about birds. I'll come to that later. But to talk generally, a lot of birds migrate. So most of the birds, migrate from the northern latitude, high latitude, into the southern side, the tropics, and from the Antarctica and those areas into the tropics during the winter time. So when the temperature goes down in the northern hemisphere, and that is the time then certain birds move out from the northern hemisphere into the tropical countries where there are a lot of resources to survive. So some of and this map you can see like certain these are the migratory pathways of certain group of birds. So the red, the blue one that shows from the northeastern Siberia into Africa. So that is called the northern wheatear. The northern wheatear travel from the Siberia into the southern tip of the Africa. So on the other side, Arctic tern. Arctic tern you can see somewhere close to the most northernmost Arctic side, and from there it goes down into the Antarctic side. And if you look at one of the famous, bird that we see in Kerala, maybe a couple of years back, is about the Amur Falcon. So Amur Falcon travels from the southeast China into Africa, just passing through India, through in India in the northeastern hill states. And certain times we can see Amur Falcon in Kerala side also. And I think 2 years back, there was some good number of Amur Falcon was sighted in Kerala state in many places. And another bird that is short-tail shearwater, that's also travel from the whole of Australian side and into the Siberia, northeastern Siberia and all that. So so if you look at certain birds, actually have the entire globe as their habitat. And one of the most interesting, most remarkable migratory bird is like a bar-tailed godwit. So the bar-tailed godwit, if you look at, so there was some records, it winters in West Africa and goes to Siberia over time. So, and its route is actually about 10,000 kilometers. So they have to travel from their wintering grounds into the breeding ground. So one of the scientists, they tracked their bird and from Africa till Siberia, and found that almost they travel about every day, almost like 10 to 16 hours in a day, covering about 1,000 kilometers. So you can imagine, like, when we travel from the Kerala, suppose we travel from Trivandrum to Kasaragod, it will take some 13 hours in the crowded, traffic. And we just cover only 500 kilometers, almost like a 500 kilometers. So these birds actually fly about, nearly 1,000 kilometers with one stopover in between. And with 3 stops, they go from, they reach about Morocco, and one of the last point was the Wadden Sea. And from there, actually, this godwit has taken as a non-stop flight of 4,000 kilometers to reach Siberia. So these are like amazing facts about the bird migration. So, and why they are migrating? So that is an interesting question. Why they migrate? Migration actually involve a lot of risk for a species, so that we all know. And why birds migrate? That is an important question. And let's see what are the basic factors that motivate a species to migrate from one place to other place. So bird migration occurs primarily in association with the seasonal changes in food availability, with the alternation of warm and cold season at high latitudes and wet and dry seasons in tropics. So, so that's a major point. So in you know that in higher latitudes, like in polar region or in the southern side, so when the winter comes in, it will be so harsh. There won't be any flowers. There won't be any food available for the species to eat. And that is the time the species that breeds there, they just go back to a much more favorable habitat, which are normally in tropical regions. So we get a lot of birds from tropical polar region during our from say like August onwards. So we being the tropical area and Kerala and all Kerala, Western Ghats, all the tropical region, we get most of the migrants from August onwards, and these birds will continue here till the beginning of the monsoon. And more than that, that is the time, like after May, June, July will be the springtime in the northern hemisphere. Then they will get a lot of food at that place. So this seasonal changes in food availability, that is one of the major reason that a species moves from one place to another for exploring and living in another region, that for their survival. So, and how they move, they use geomagnetic systems, and they use sun and daytime and the stars in the nights. These are the major things that so far scientists have actually tried to correlate how the birds move. They use earth magnetic systems for orientation, and for that they have certain adaptations in their beak, as well as at certain systems in their brain also has been found in recent research. So when a bird start to migrate, so in their body there'll be certain mechanism, just like that is called a migratory restlessness. Like they will start wagging their tail, and there is some body mechanism that triggers. This is the time for start migrating into the wintering grounds. So this is actually learned or an evolutionary trait that actually adapted by the bird over a period of time. So the when the winter starts in the northern hemisphere, automatically the bird starts a migratory restlessness, and that's how they start migrating. So before migrating, they keep a lot of body fat, so that they can use that energy for migratory flights. So timing mechanism stimuli trigger migration about the same date. So certain birds starts at the same date each year and come back almost same period when conditions are suitable for breeding. So the breeding grounds, for example, in the northern hemisphere, many of the birds are, so that is their breeding grounds, and rest of the time they spend their entire life. I would say like our birds, our migratory birds, for example, the greenish leaf warbler, they come as early as in mid-August, then August, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. So almost 10 months they are spending in our forest, so tropical forest. So we should really think about it. What are their home habitat, whether it is our forest, or are they just moving into the in the northern side for just for breeding and coming back again into our forest. So we have to really think about who are the migrants and what kind of how they evolved this particular trait of migration over a period of time. So basically, before starting a migration, most of the birds, all the birds have to maintain high level of fat in their body. So that will help them. For example, in the case of godwit, we saw that they fly about 16 hours overnight, and covers about 1,000 kilometers. So that the locomotion, the flight actually need a lot of energy, and you need a high metabolic rate, so that only you can raise your body and you can fly. So as a human being, we need some 10 to 15 meter long wings to take over our body if we want to fly. So as a bird, so birds have actually got a lot of adaptation, like hollow kind of a bone, and there are a lot of advantages, and the feather. All these are advantages they got over evolutionary time to make flight as a major tool for their survival. So for flying long distance, birds usually require a lot of food. So when during their breeding season, when there are food are in abundance, that is the time many of the birds starts breeding. So why these species are going into from a tropical region into a polar region for breeding is that is the time plenty of foods are available in the polar region. That is the time the spring starts, plants started growing, they start flowering, there will be fruits, there will be caterpillars, there will be insect life. So everything is in abundance. So so because of the rich food sources, these birds explore that possibility, and they take advantages of the food availability in the polar region, and they starts breeding, and they will be able to raise much more number of offspring, when they are breeding in a polar region compared to they breed in a tropical region. So there are certain facts that that involve what are the advantages of this long distance migration. So a migratory lifestyle, so that itself is a very challenging one. For example, if suppose we have to as a human being, if we have to stay or live in two different environments. For example, think of we live half of our time in a tropical region, then we fly and staying in a cold place in Alaska for some time. So it's not that easy to get adapted into an entirely different kind of habitat for us to survive. So for a bird also, this migratory lifestyle has a lot of advantages and disadvantages also. But over a period of time, the fitness of the bird, fitness of the population, actually that is the main thing that has been accounted over the risks and other factors that involve, especially the drawbacks that involve in a migratory lifestyle. So the one important point is like living, the ability to live in two difficult parts of the world. So the birds that breeds in the polar region, they have to move to the tropical region for rest of the year. So they have to have an adaptability to live in a tropical humid climate as well as in a cold climate in the polar region. And they should be able to occupy different habitat and climatic regions. That's what I just mentioned. Like the tropical climates are much more hotter, much more humid. At the same time, the polar region will be dry as well as cold. So they have to adapt more into these two kind of habitat. And they have to deal with a different kind of foods. For example, in the food that will be available in a tropical region will be different from that is available in a polar region. For example, the insects will be different, or for an insectivorous birds, so all these matters, and there will be a different kind of community, entirely different community. For example, if a greenish leaf warbler that comes into our forest in Western Ghats, so we also have a different set of predators here. So we have a different kind of, for example, our shikra or a besra. These are all very, very, very intelligent predators in a forest ecosystem. As well as there will be a lot of snakes or other group of birds. They are mostly predators in that ecosystem. So they have to meet with a different kind of entirely different community in two different habitats. in a northern region as well as in the tropical region. And they have to fill in with the different niches. So for example, a bird that an understory bird in a polar region, when it comes to a tropical region, they will be looking into a different kind of a niche. For example, they might be looking mostly on the canopy for foods, because they have to compete with a similar kind of a species in an understory. So there are different kind of niche available in the tropical region as well as in a polar region or a high latitude region. So they have to adapt to they should have a different skill set or the different adaptation to forage different kind of niche in different kind of habitats. So these are the key factors that actually support a migratory lifestyle, or the species have to excel in this kind of skill set to live or survive in a migratory lifestyle. So migratory lifestyle itself is a very risky, but why they choose migratory lifestyle is an interesting point. So I'll come to that soon. So if you look at species, bird species who are, we can say, different kind of population. For example, our jungle crow. Our jungle crow is not a migrant bird; it's a resident bird. It's bird. It makes its nest here in our local environment, and they forage in the urban landscapes, mostly a scavenger bird, and they very well take eggs and prey on the smaller birds. So this kind of population usually stay in they are usually a sedentary population. So they are called resident birds. So they don't move anyway. So they just fly from their, for example, they fly every day like some 10, 15 kilometers and come back to that particular point again and again. And certain birds, they fly from much more larger area for foraging. For example, they travel some, for example, if you look at vultures, we have vultures in Wayanad Wildlife Sanctuary, and vultures are able to fly about 100 kilometers in a day for having their food. So for example, because they are large bodied birds and they need to, their food is mostly they are getting on scavenging, and they have to get some dead animals or either predated by tiger or a leopard or some other animal, and they come in flock and they feed on that particular food, and they need a large volume of food. And because of that, their home range is much more larger. So they, in a day, these large birds like vultures travel almost 100 kilometers, 120 kilometers in a day. At the same time, if you're looking at monarch flycatcher or a Tickle's blue flycatcher, and their home range will be much more smaller. So they will be, whenever you observe a Tickle's blue flycatcher near to your home or one of your regular bird watching area, every day morning you go, it will be somewhere there, just like in some 50-meter radius or maybe in a 1 kilometer radius. So these birds will be. So these birds are called sedentary population. They don't move at all. And certain other kind of adaptation is that's called hibernation. So one example that I have shown in this photograph is the common powil. It's a British Columbian species of nightjar. So what they do, they are not able to migrate their own. So since they are not able to migrate, what they do is they hibernate. They reduce their all body activities and they take a standstill position. They sit for, without any movement in a particular location for months. That's like some of the scientists, they studied this common powil and found that they can hibernate for almost 90 days, 3 months time. So that so that is called a stage called torpor. So they don't they don't fly, they sit at a particular point and all their energy requirements are very much minimized during this period. And what period is that they hibernate, they go to hibernate when the winter comes in that area, like extreme weather conditions, and their birds are not able to migrate, but they have to adopt a different mechanism for survival. And this particular method is called hibernation. Certain birds do this. And apart from common powil, another good example is the hummingbirds. Hummingbirds also do this, go into a stage of torpor when they are extreme, the temperature goes much more low category. So certain other group of birds. So these are the group of birds who migrate. So migratory birds, so they move away from that particular habitat for survival. So species that live in a seasonal environments, and they want to explore into different locations like tropical savannas and grasslands, and they spend rest of the time in that particular habitat, and they go back to their breeding grounds only for breeding. So what helps them? Relatively stable conditions of tropical lowland forests where food supply remains fairly constant. For example, we know that we have around some 200 300 plus species which are mostly resident birds. So if you look at our forest, for example, we have evergreen forests, we have moist deciduous forests, we have wetlands. So wherever we go, we could see a lot of birds. And in some way or another way, we will have, there will be a different kind of food. There will be any. So if you look at most of our birds in the Kerala or the parts of Western Ghats, there are frugivorous, there are birds which are omnivores. They eat most on the insects as well as fruits. So this dual diet mechanism always help the bird to survive in a tropical region and throughout the year. So they never face any shortage of food supply. So these kind of birds never migrate. So when there is food abundance, there is no point of migrating. And but there is not enough food, they have to migrate. That's how the birds from the polar region goes to tropical region. And in a tropical region, the abundance of food is always a guarantee. So they can come to the tropical region, explore the food available there, plenty of food, and they remain almost 10 months they spend in Kerala or Western Ghats. And after that, they go back. So globally, it is estimated that about 50 billion birds are migrating worldwide. So it's not a simple thing. 50 billion birds are migrating worldwide. So that is an importance. You see why they are migrating. Why? So basically, it is driven by the shortage of food or the availability of food and the suitable habitat that drives the particular species to migrate over a period of time. So now looking at why they migrate. So I will go a little bit into the fitness of a species. So migration occurs where individuals benefit more in terms of survival and reproduction if seasonally between different areas than if they remain in the same area. So that's what I meant. So if a bird is able to survive better if they adopt a migratory lifestyle, so the natural selection will favor that kind of a behavior, that kind of an adaptation. For example, if a pair of greenish leaf warbler is able to stay in our Western Ghats forest and starts breeding here, and if they are able to produce 2 offsprings in a year while staying in a Western Ghats forest, tropical forest area, and if you go for if you take a migratory lifestyle, if they move from this tropical region into a polar region where the food is abundant and there are less predators and the environment for breeding is much more convenient, and if they are able to produce instead of 2, 4 or 6 offsprings, so naturally the birds will adapt into that kind of a lifestyle that gives more fitness, more number of individuals, and more survival into a particular species. So this is one of the the binding principle that motivate or that adapt a particular species to adapt this kind of a migratory lifestyle. So the question is about the survival and the reproduction rate and the number of individuals that it can produce in a particular region compared to into another region. So driven by food shortage caused by limited plant growth. So what happened? Why they moving out from the polar region into a tropical region is like that. There you can see that during the winter months, the number of plants will be very less. The insect life will be much more less, and plant growth also will be affected by limited, limited solar radiation, as well as the growth of the plants. So, and that means you have a limited shortage of limited supply of food. So this shortage of food supply motivate the birds to move into the tropical region where they can feed on abundance. The costs are like you have to the costs involved in this long migratory paths are the cost of how the you are able to maintain enough fat on your body, or you have to face the consequences on the journey itself. So those things are very important things. So in high latitude, so day length is also is limited for diurnal birds to collect enough food. That is one another reason. Like if there is a if the daytime is much more short, you are not able to forage for a entire duration, so that you will get enough food. So if you are able to forage for only 4 hours in a day in a polar region, and if you are able to like almost 12 hours in a day in a tropical region, so you will get a lot of food. And in the polar region, if you are staying in a polar region, you will be limited by the length of your daytime. So how much daylight is available for that in a polar region. So this actually matters in terms of collecting the food. So another question is, why can't they stay in wintering grounds? That's what I say. So for example, a bird comes to a tropical region, and why they are not able to stay here? No, they won't stay here because they find like going and traveling all the way from tropical region into a polar region and using the resources in the polar region and breeding and raising for 2 or 4 offsprings are much better, give much more fitness into an individual and population compared to their staying in a tropical region. So any individual that move to higher altitude with increasing food and long days might younger than if they stayed in wintering grounds competing with the residence birds. So that is also an interesting aspect, like instead of competing with the, so for example, the in a tropical region there will be always, for example, in Kerala we have 250 or 300 resident birds. If a migratory birds like a greenish warbler wanted to breed here, so breeding itself is involve a lot of other activities, defending your territory. You have to bring food frequently into your young ones, and with that you will also compete with the other group of birds in that particular area. For example, we have flycatchers, and we have the verdictor flycatcher is a migratory birds that comes from the Himalaya, and we have the other blue flycatcher like Nilgiri flycatcher or Tickle's blue. So if you are using in the same niche for breeding and to raise your young ones, you have to compete with the other birds here. So instead of having competition here, it's better to take a migratory flight and go to a polar region, raise there and one, and come back with a more number of individuals from the same group. So that's one of the driving factors behind the migratory birds. The main cause associated with the migration is the mortality associated with the journey. So that is one important, like that, for example, in the Amur Falcon, so a lot of Amur Falcons are being killed in the northeastern hill days by the resident indigenous communities during the past many years. So when the large number of birds come to a location, so it is easy for local people to predate on them, and they also consume a lot of birds. So in the whole journey, the journey itself is a big risk for the species to survive. And other risks are like basically the storms and seasonal weather, and a greater range of pathogens, predators, and etc. Now we all know that we are in a situation like we are facing the pandemic like COVID-19. So, and we are now experiencing the extreme climate events. So I think this is normally by the end of October, we should have northeast monsoon, but right now we are facing cyclone related rainfall and intense rainfall. So it will have an impact on the all organisms like agriculture sector or insects life or whatever. So it's all will be affected. So even the birds starts breeding in particular time. If you have a off-season rain, heavy intense rain, that can damage the entire clutch size or nesting sites and everything. If it is damaged, it won't help in the longer way to survive. So on the migratory path also, the weather conditions and all these pathogens. So for example, the risk of pathogens are very important, because avian malaria is an important aspects. That is one thing that is there in the bird itself, but that bird can also be exposed to other viruses and all that, because they during the migratory process, they stop in different places. And from there, they stay 1 or 2 days. But by the time they have to take maximum food from that region and raise their, fat content in their body. So they won't be looking at what a celebrity kind of feeding habit, but whatever they possible, they will take as their food. So that also create more risk of exposing them into different pathogens. And also there will be a risk from the predator. Different predators are there. So there are certain places in the migratory pathways where the certain raptors are increasingly capture smaller birds. So this can happen over a period of time. So for migratory habit to persist, despite the risk involved in the long journey, the net fitness of individuals moving both ways outweighs the cost. That's what I said. Like whatever risk they take, the total benefit for the species and population that outweighs the smaller loss that happened to certain individuals in that population. So that doesn't matter. So the overall selection will go for the migratory kind of a lifestyle that will benefit the entire population and increase their fitness and survival. So the overall gain in maintaining good numbers through migration then remains the same area with a small population or limited by the limited food supply. So these species exist today by their migratory. So these are the kind of species that exist now as a migratory species in our most of our habitats. So if we look at the history of glacial, the migration, if you look, you see, for example, the bird migration actually influenced by, or it is evolved by the past climate change and cycles on the earth. For example, the last glaciation was 25,000 years before, not 25,000 to 15 years before. And that time, the whole of Europe and other areas were completely under ice cover. So the most of the birds at that time that we see as a migrants, Palearctic migrants, were much more lower latitude area. So when the ice age started disappearing, ice started melting out from those areas. So these birds who are lying in the much more lower latitude area started moving up and up. So they started increasing their habitat and range much more into the northern side. So and started colonizing. So these birds, then they started they started moving into much more into the Siberia, Russia, and those areas. And those birds have actually have a habit of migrating from the polar, tropical, the high latitude into the tropical region. And they used to move back and forth over a period of time. So in the history, if we're looking at during the last 2.5 million years, there are at least 20 times the glaciation cycles happen, like extreme ice age, and there is a dry period. So this happened over 20-30 times during the last 2.5 million years. And many of the birds are exposed to this kind of cycles in nature, and they are well adapted through this process, and an ability of adopting a migratory lifestyle was inbuilt in the species over a period of time. So there's an inherent property within the species to migrate. So when the environment is adverse, and to when to adopt a stationary or a sedentary lifestyle when the climate conditions are different. So this process actually over millions of years, and when they passes through all these cycles of glaciation over a period of time, that motivated, or that actually give a strength for the species to adapt to these changes in nature, and their migratory habit, migratory behavior that is very well improved or enhanced, giving more fitness into that individual. This is how the migration actually or the climate change actually help the species to adapt a migratory lifestyle. So now come to that ancestry of tropic, and there are other studies in recent times, and one of the interesting studies shows that many generations, the tropical ancestors of those birds disperse from their tropical breeding and to northwards. So one of the studies shows that these some birds that we now see as a migrant, and they are basically have a tropical, their ancestry is of a tropical origin. So they moved from tropical region into, when the climate was much more favorable into the northern side, they moved from here, and they expanded their range and dispersed from the tropical from their tropical breeding into northward. And the seasonal abundance of insect food and greater day length allowed them to raise more young than they stay at home in tropical relatives. So this is what I said before, like how the species are actually, able to adopt a migratory lifestyle over a period of time. And their breeding zones moved north during periods of glacial retreat. The birds continue to come back to the tropical homes as winter weather and declining food supplies made life more difficult for them to survive in those areas. So they moved from these are based on the DNA based studies, shows that they moved from the tropical region into the polar region, and they use that when during the periods of glacial retreat, the birds continue to come back to their tropical homes as a winter, as winter weather was harsh in that area and their food supply was much more limited. So there are examples like the North American flycatchers, tanagers, warblers, and all that. So their origin shows that they were originated in the tropical region. So here is an example of the same hypothesis of this particular wood warblers, American wood warblers, how they expanded during the larger period of time. And from a parent bird that was originated in the Northern America, and slowly over a period of time, they expanded their breeding and wintering range, and gradually the wintering range expanded much more into the South America. So now the bird also evolved over a period of time in terms of its plumage, in terms of its movement from the Northern America into the Southern America, and giving a totally different outlook, or moving into a totally different plumage and a different bird. But you can connect back to their ancestry and found that how the birds actually expanded or their wintering range from Northern America into the tropical South American region. So this gives a pattern how species are evolving over a period of time in terms or in connection with the changes in the climate, as well as the shortage of food supply over a period of time. Now, how do we study this? So these are the general answers that is available right now in science about the why they are migrating. Now let us see how we are monitoring this. So there are a lot of techniques that we adopt. One is ringing birds. So we can attach a small aluminum or plastic ring onto the one of the tarsus of the bird. And when the bird come back to certain, normally the migratory birds come back to the same area again and again, and you can look at the birds or retrap the birds again in your landscape and mark the dates and all that. And when it is being sighted in some other area, they will also inform, okay, this bird is ringed from this area on this date, and we can compare when and how they are moving about, how much time they are taking up for these migratory flights and all that. And another technique is like a radar short pulse of radio waves records their recourse from the targets. That was used very expensive techniques, but nowadays we have much more cheaper techniques like radio tagging, and GSM chips are also used for to understand the passage of or the pathways of migration. So radio tagging transmitters, they can track anywhere in the world. So from these studies, we can understand about migration routes, where they are stopping, what is the speed of travel, what is the direction of wind, weather effects, and orientation abilities, etc., and how they are able to survive over a long journey. So for example, the godwit has been found that they are travel about 10,000 kilometers for their to their wintering ground and back to their breeding ground. So now we have techniques that we can track these movements. And another important thing about the migratory behavior, or feature that we look into the individual of a particular species, like the wing shape. So pointed wings, and helps a bird to fly longer distance in longer period of time. Longer wings are more efficient aerodynamically. So these are all adaptations they gain over a period of time. So I already talked about the kind of process, like the movement of birds during the maybe at least in last 3 million years, like in accordance with the climate change, how the species are adapting a migratory lifestyle as well as a sedentary lifestyle. So in certain birds who have adopted to a migratory lifestyle, so they have got more adaptation. That is actually over period of time, these facilities or these features are getting more and more selected, helping the bird to increase their fitness in different environmental conditions. So longer wings are one important thing. And certain birds actually use different kind of flights. For example, wing flapping and flying. For example, the ducks fly with the wing flaps, and in certain other birds they use for a gliding. So some other birds, they flap their wings and raise some heights, and after that they glide for some distance. So in that way they can reduce their cost of energy for a travel for long distance. And some other birds do what they do is rising. They rise into certain heights by wing flapping and dipping on closed and half closed wings. Certain times, so they, for example, if you see the flight of Malabar grey hornbill, so they are large birds. So if they start flapping and flying for long distance, they will die off after some time without they don't have enough energy to keep on wing flapped a flight. So that will be difficult for that. So what they do is they flap their wings for some time and they close and scoops for some distance. And when the height lowers, they do their wing flap, and again they gain some distance. And through that mode of flight, they will be able to travel some good distance. And their the pointed beak also helps those kind of birds to easily navigate in the air. So body shape, length of the wings, etc., all are very, very important. And another important thing that we always say, that the migratory birds, they form V shape during the flight. Like one bird will be in the front and there will be other birds flying in a V formation. So what are the advantages of this? Why they are forming this V shape? That will be always a curious question. So this V formation always help the bird to reduce their cost of energy cost by 10 to 12 to 20%, because when the bird is flying in the front, and if the another bird is flying right next to that, when the first bird flap their wings, with that upthrust, the bird which is close to that, it will have an advantage of using lesser energy for their wing flap. So another bird which is flying much more closer to the second bird will also get the advantage of the bird in front of that particular bird. So overall, the birds that travel over a long distance for migratory journey, by forming this V shape, they will also reduce and make advantage of the first bird that is flying in the front. But the first bird will move into the after some time, this particular bird will move towards the back side, and another birds will be on the front side. So every day they will be changing one by one, and overall the group will get at least a 15 to 20% on their energy savings for a long distance. That's why they form the V shape when they are flying out. So another type of birds adaptation is like a passive soaring, like just like soar for and gliding, and make use of the thermals. Thermals means when the sun comes up, the earth's surface heat up differentially at different locations. Where there is a rock, so that will heat up quickly, and there will be air going upward, so that we can use as a circulation. So birds, just like with their wings adjustment, they can raise good height through these thermals, and when they attain a very good height, from that point they can glide for some good distance until they find another thermals. So for example, some honey buzzards in the Europe, they use this particular thermals for traveling along the mountain ridges for long migratory routes. So so that is an advantage used by certain group of birds, especially the larger bodied raptors and all that. Say they use this updraft caused by thermals, and through that they can actually save 5 to 20% of their total energy required for the flight. And looking at the orientation and how they are coming back to every day, they coming to their own place, is that recent research shows that the bird's eye interact with its brain in a region called cluster N, which probably help the birds to determine which way is north. So the and I see the magnetic, the iron compounds, very minute level of iron in their nerves actually help the bird to orient their direction using their earth magnetic fields to whether to move to the northern direction, or and that also help the bird to come whether they have reached the tropical region or whether they are reached the polar region with high variability in the earth magnetic field. The polar region has high magnetic field and the tropic has less, so they can orient within their system, like using their eyes and this ears and beak. So the beak birds may use an olfactory map. This is a new thing that's coming up. The nerves in a bird's beak may help it determine the angle created by Earth's magnetic field and the Earth itself. This helps the bird orient itself to a particular place. So when we see a bird in color and good color and beak and and it's colorful birds, but behind that there is a different kind of mechanism that helps these species to travel long distance over a period of time. So looking at different type, when are they migrating? Many diurnal birds also migrate under darkness. For example, divers, pelicans, raptors, storks, ibises, herons, flamingos, they are all travel during daytime. At the same time, grapes, bitterns, rail, quails, parrots, cuckoos, owls, nightjar, and all, they travel mainly in night time. So but still we don't know why they are. Maybe over a period of time, like an evolutionary time scale, they would have adapted to these kind of systems that need much more insight into the studies. So coming to India, we have a lot of migratory birds, and a lot of materials are available online for looking at what are migratory birds and to observe migratory birds in your location. So that gives different tracking systems, like this is the map of US geological systems. They track the birds all over the world and how they found, like how they are traveling over a period of time. Now we have the wonderful eBird maps that is being created. I'll show some of the maps that being created by eBird India from Bird Count India website from all of our observations. Like we observe birds by giving a lot of listing in different places, and how the listing of migratory species is able to provide information about the migratory routes of the birds. For example, this is an Amur Falcon. So you can see that Amur Falcon that comes from southern China, passing through the northeast India, and they reach into that August, September, they come into the Africa, and by April they go back to that their home and into the southeast China. So these observations are made from the people who observe the bird on a particular region. For example, you observe a bird in Trivandrum on a particular day, I observe the bird in Wayanad on another day, so another person in Bangalore observe the bird in another day. So we'll have these data getting accumulated over days and days and all that. So you'll get a pattern of movements so that you can project. So there are nice maps available in the Bird Count India where you can look at, for example, the bar-headed geese. So that comes from Mongolia, China, and the entire population winter in our India. So India is an important region for this particular species. So we always say migratory birds are okay, they are migratory, But in actual terms, these birds spend almost 10 months in India, and only for 3 months they are moving into this high latitude regions like China or Russia or things like that. But rest of the time they are spending their whole life in our forest of tropical region. So, and one common bird is the migratory Blythe-reed warbler, very tiny bird. We see the entire bird. We see that this map very interesting, no? So this is the June, July, August months. By the time they are in the Europe, and August onwards, they started migrating into India. So August, September, October, November, December. So I'll just say, yeah, August, September, October, November, December. By December, the entire population will come into our southern South Indian forest mostly, and continue up to the month of May. So May onwards, they just fly into Europe and they breed there. As I told you earlier, like you make utilize of the resource in that region. And after breeding the young ones, they just come back to again into the tropical region. So this is the greenish leaf warbler and green leaf warbler. They also use the same pattern for India. And this is Wimbrel. Wimbrel is a very interesting species. They breeds in the Europe. And from there, they travel during winter into all the coast across the world. Like they travel all over the world for wintering. And during the summer months, they go back to their home grounds. There's another species called Oriental turtle dove. Oriental turtle dove is actually got a breeding grounds in the whole of China. Southeast China is one of their favorite sport, and from there they come back to Himalayas as well as into the southern central India and even in the Kerala side. So we get a lot of birds in our location. And the Indian pitta is another migratory bird that actually migrate within India, like they breeds in the central India and Himalayan region. And from there, they coming down to south. So we have a lot of observation from Kerala that gives a very good value for this kind of patterns. So when our study we did in 2009 and 2010 found that we actually calculated the density of these birds in the Kerala forest. And we found that one of the high dense bird in our forest is the greenish leaf warbler. So we found around 44 birds per square kilometer, and Blythe-reed as a 25.7 birds per square kilometer, and large-billed as a 15 birds per square kilometer. So all these migratory birds are seen in good numbers in our forest area, equally compared to our resident birds. At the same time, some of our resident birds like blue-winged parakeet, they are seen on 31 birds per square kilometer. Small sunbird is only 20 birds per square kilometer. So whereas the Blythe and the greenish leaf warbler have 44 birds. So it's like, how rich are the tropical forests are, and these tropical forest systems support huge number of birds with their very diverse insect life and fruits and everything. They support large number of birds for survival. And now the problem with the whole migration is that climate change is affecting the whole process, and rising temperature causing a lot of problem with the migratory birds, and it is difficult for many species to reach on their destination on time. So global warming may also be affecting the timing of spring vegetation blooms or the insects abundance at that the high latitude area, and strongly affecting the survival of the migratory birds. So birds' bodies are getting smaller over time, while their wingspans are getting longer in response to rising temperature. There are new studies coming that birds are also adapting into the changes in climate by reducing their body weight, or along with a more longer wingspans that enable them to fly, adapt into a much more warmer climatic condition. So I'll just show a story of a migratory, how climate change impact the particular species. So it will be an interesting video if you have time. So these are actually a great tit and a flycatcher that is seen in the Netherlands. So
this is a European pied flycatcher at a nest box in the Netherlands.
Can
and
you
it is
see
about
that?
to make a bad decision.
So they provide
How did this white
nests,
flycatcher end up getting
artificial
killed
nests for
inside this
birds,
great
for
tit's
these
nest?
flycatchers and
And what
great.
is the link with climate
So they
change?
found that
To understand this,
in
let's
the
first zoom
great
out
it
a
is
little
actually
bit.
predating on the
This is a snapshot of a forest in the Netherlands in May.
flycatchers. And why
There's
they
a
are
nest box
predating
attached to
on the
this tree,
flycatchers is
and
that
there's another
because
1,000 such nest boxes in this study area.
so
These nest boxes are
in
readily
these
used
nest
by a
boxes, they
variety
could
of
see a lot
forest-dwelling
of
birds
forest birds.
and allow us to monitor their breeding behavior in great detail. For this research, we focused on the main occupants of the nest boxes, the pied flycatchers
So the
on the
pied
top left
flycatchers
and the grey
actually
tits on the bottom
and the
right.
great tits are there are the two birds that
Apart
found,
from
and
their
these two
reliance on
birds actually
cavities,
depending on the
both bird
same kind of
species raise their
caterpillar
offspring largely on a
for raising
caterpillar
their
diet.
young ones.
Caterpillars are a
So
high-quality
there
food
is
source, which are
high
only available for a short
competition
period
between.
during
Excuse me,
so birds have
Yes.
to time their breeding well to make
I
use.
cannot hear you well because of the video.
Okay,
You can mute the video and you can speak.
your video sound is also coming up.
Yeah, just mute the
Is it
video.
okay that you can listen to that?
No, you
Yeah.
talk and then you can mute the video. You can
Okay.
up to the right side, there's a mute button,
Okay.
and then you can speak. Yeah, in the model.
Right side.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are interesting story of
When
this
two species rely on similar
white
limiting
flycatcher
resources,
and the
they are
great
set
ticks.
to
Ayo,
be
Tada,
competitive
mute
and take
Wait.
place over divisible resources, in our case caterpillars, or
Just 1 second.
പ്ലേ ചെയ്തിട്ട് അതിലോട്ട് പ്രസ് ചെയ്താൽ മ്യൂട്ട് ആവും.
indivisible resources, in our case nesting cavities.
Click on that.
In short, both species need nest boxes and
Wait.
caterpillars.
വോളിയം കുറയ്ക്കണം.
But how does climate change
Let
affect
me
any
check
of
the
this?
volume. Okay.
Okay.
No, you can explain.
So the story is about these two flycatchers who are flycatcher and tit that depends on the same kind of caterpillar for breeding. So they installed a nest box in their forest area, about 1,000 nest boxes, and found that the tits is continuously feeding on the actually killing the flycatchers. So why this is happening is that the great tit is a resident bird and the flycatcher is a migratory bird. So when the flycatcher comes into the habitat, back in Netherlands, what happens? Because of the climate change, the flowering season actually it advanced much more earlier period of time. So and with that changes in the pattern of flowering season, the caterpillars also emerge much more early. So what they have to do, the tit has actually adjusted their breeding season with the availability of the our caterpillars. So they are able to feed on them and to raise successfully. But when the winter, in certain times, winter actually time, there is a harsh winter time, and by the time they the flowering season actually move a little bit backward, like it becomes slightly late, and that coincide with the arrival of the flycatcher. So the both birds have to compete for food and breeding site. So then that is the right time they are getting enough food for their breeding. So they have to compete each other for raising their foods. Their breeding times comes on the same time, so they compete each other. But unfortunately, the tit has an advantage. They attack most of the pied flycatchers, and even they use their feathers as a nesting material in their cavity, and these birds are not able to survive. So this is happening. So this video is available online. You can just look at it. It's part of a biology research paper published in 2019. So an interesting evidence that shows that how migratory pattern or the changes in climate is affecting the species survival, fitness, everything. So that's it. And
Vishnu,
Yeah.
So for interrupting, our time
Yeah,
is
this
up.
is the time is over. I know that. I'm
Yeah.
also finished. Sorry for taking a little bit more time.
Yeah,
So
that is
this is the last slide. So
okay.
flyways, flyways are going out, and what we can do. So that is just like if you look at globally, no fuel on the flyway. That is habitat degradation. You know that all over the world, habitat is changing because of human. You know, our population is increasing a lot. IPCC report is right now is there. We have to reduce the emission and all. And journeys are cancelled. That means the many birds are not migrating. That will have an implication, as I told you, how migratory lifestyle has come into a bird's population's lifestyle. So if that is cancelled, means their success and they are going towards an extinction. And warm weather increases the competition for breeding places, as I told you just now in the case of these flycatcher and tits. So there is a competition, and you know that the best that fit survive. And early bird catches the worm. Climate change lead to food shortages. That is everywhere it is happening. And yeah, it is great threat to migratory birds and reduce. And what we can do is like reduce energy that we use and turning off whatever we can and reduce and reuse. That is the only way to keep the global emissions down to, and we have a commitment, we have to make a commitment to reduce the GHG emissions by, and the global temperature at least by 1.5 degrees by next 2030. Otherwise, this will go beyond our control. So that's it. That's the whole thing that I can share about you. Thank you so much. Any questions we can take?
Okay.
And
Me, sir.
lots of kids are there today, so there'll be a lot of questions, I
Oh
think.
my God.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
I have a doubt.
Yes.
So I am not very clear with the part like the pit actually kill the flycatchers. So why do they kill them?
Not pitta.
It is tit, T-I-T, great it. So
Okay.
tits are actually very strong birds. They have a, you know, they are, even though they are small, they are quite aggressive. They kill because, see, normally the tits breeding time, they don't expect the flycatcher in that landscape. So they can breed easily. But
Okay.
when there is a climate change, so the springs become slightly late, that coincide with the arrival of the flycatcher in that landscape. So when the flycatcher comes to that landscape, normally the tits breeding will be over and they'll be having their young ones and they'll be flying here and there. Now the point is like they have to compete for their food. So they compete each other for food as well as for their nest site. So that is why they attack each other and to take advantage of available nest boxes. And the only way to kill the poor, migratory bird, and that bird will be weak after a long migratory path in the initial days. So these are all the things that happens in nature when there is climate change and also the competition between species.
Okay. So thank you.
Welcome.
I would request everybody to like switch on your video so that we can all see each other.
Vishnu, there was a question earlier. So why birds avoid some stretch of paddy fields for foraging? Or they are completely absent from some plots, but were abundant we can see in adjacent plots. Why it happens?
Means they are seen in certain areas, not seen in certain other areas. No?
Certain areas, yeah.
For example, in agriculture field, I think there may be two things working. Maybe one is maybe a polluted field, or you have more chemical compounds in that water. That will have an implication on the number of food, the variety of food that is. For example, the worms available in that particular field. So if you're using more fertilizer, your water will be contaminated. That will have an implication on the abundance of soil-related microorganisms in that soil. That may be one reason that they move from such one field into some other fields. But we have to look at case by case what could be the reason. But generally, a bird that avoid a particular places that there won't be nothing to eat in that. So.
Okay, any more questions?
You cannot unmute and ask if somebody is asking. Oh, I'm going to take a screenshot. So can you all switch on your videos, please?
Excuse me.
Yes.
How does the bird survive the long journey without a break?
Most of the migratory birds, they take a break in the journey. So as I shown in the first slide of bark-tailed godwit, they in their 10,000 kilometer long journey, they usually take 4 to 5 stopovers. So those places are called stopovers. So they stop at a particular location where they can find food. They remain there for 2-3 days, eat enough food, fill up their stomach, and raise enough fat in their body, and they fly for next 1,000 kilometers, 2,000 kilometers, like that. So these places are called migratory stopover.
How many days an average migration takes?
Or depends on like a species. For example, what we take 5 to 6 days, 6-7 days for a coverage of 10,000 kilometers. Like every 16 hours, they try to cover like 1,000 kilometers. So depends on species to species. For example, an Indian bitter that travel from Himalaya to Kerala, so that covers only some 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 kilometers. And in between, they might take 1 or 2 stops in between. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, will everybody please switch on your videos, please.
Is the longest migratory bird an term?
Yeah, I think so. Arctic tern covers from pole to pole, no? Arctic to Antarctica. So Arctic tern perhaps would be the longest. Bar-tailed godwits also equally, they travel about 10,000. The Arctic tern, one of the Arctic tern, I think the recorded kilometers was like one side about 10,500, 11,000, something like that.
Okay, I know. Then let's conclude. If there are no more questions.
Yes, it is already 8:20. So
Yeah.
that was a really, really nice session. Thank you, Vishata. Like I've known you for long, and your classes are always really fun. A lot of information, fascinating stuff. I hope the children, there are lots of children today. I hope they are all inspired to learn more about birds. Thank you for taking this session for us. I think that's all. Thank you. So I guess see you next month. Yeah. Did we take a screenshot? A lot of people are coming on this thing. I really hope I can travel to Wayanad soon to see all the birds. You're on mute, Vishad. Are we having any surveys or anything coming up?
Maybe in December we'll have some.
Oh, definitely. I have to
some, at least one.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. See you
Thank
next week.
WWF, big thanks.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you, Vishnu.
Everybody have a happy puja holidays and try watching birds. It says the migratory season has started. So good luck with all that. You have lots of holidays coming. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Sir.
Thank you.